Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of Life That Said Yes Conversations. Today, our guest is Diane Elliot. Diane Elliot is a rabbi and a teacher, a somatic movement therapist, a dancer, a choreographer, a poet, many things. And according to her biography, she loves to dance, draw, write poems, sing, and stand on this earth. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really liked this one sentence that you singled out on your website. Encompasses everything that you do and that are your passions.
Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering if you feel like it that we start with a little prayer or maybe a short song, if something intuitively comes to you, so that we set up a space for the conversation.
Yeah, there are many prayers or songs we could start with, but what I have running through my head right now is the chorus of something I was listening to earlier today by a wonderful singer, writer of liturgical and traditional music, and somebody who inspires many other people to sing, gathers communities of people together to sing. Often traditional Hebrew liturgy. So this is a line from the Psalms in Hebrew. Ashrei yoshvei vetecha od yahalalucha selah. So ashrei means, it's often translated as happy or even wealthy. But I have found other meanings for that in the very obscure Hebrew English dictionary. It also means progressing or moving forward or advancing. So Ashrei Yoshvei Vetecha, happy is the person who is moving in literally your house. And I think of that as my body is the house of the divine. So Ashrei Yoshvei Vetecha, Od Yahalalucha Selah. So they can only praise, they can only expand, really, once a person is moving forward in an embodied way and acknowledging that that body is a gift. And it ends with the word Selah, which doesn't have a specific meaning other than something like, really pay attention to that. That's really true. Or let's take a moment and breathe and absorb that information. So this is Joey Weisenberg's melody. I mean, haven't learned the whole thing, but it's running through me right now. So I've been singing it all morning. Ashrei yoshvei vetecha od yahalalucha selah. Ashrei yoshvei vetecha od yahalalucha selah. And I wish that for all of us, for myself this morning, that I can really be inside this body house, knowing that it's a gift filled with wonder and gratitude. Something I've also deeply learned from my teacher, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, my teacher of Body Mind Centering.
Beautiful, and I love this message and this idea that our body is a temple and that there is a precious gift that we are carrying and that it is a vessel for our soul. It is really the gift that I received as well from studying body mind centering, and thus this desire to have these conversations about it, to bring it more into attention, into public space, that we are really carrying this incredible gift all the time with us. And so many times we are not really aware of that. We just take it for granted or consider it, oh, it's only body. Since we are being with it every day, we start taking it for granted. But then taking this moment to pause, to shine the light into what we are carrying, many secrets are then being revealed.
Amen. Yes. Selah.
Yeah, Sela.
Yeah.
So when did this realizations start coming to you in your life? That the body is not just a material, but something more than that.
Yeah. That's, in a way, that's a hard question to answer because um, I think there are waves of awakening consciousness in different ways at different times. So I started to dance when I was very young, went to ballet class, I think from the time I was about 5, and then danced all through grade school. And then I went to a high school, a public high school, but they had a very wonderful performing arts program. And I was dancing, doing modern dance actually from about the age of 12. So for me, the body already was this expressive instrument that I was training and having a lot of joy in moving and sharing and being in front of an audience, and also began to do my own creative work in high school. Very moved often by music, and ended up studying dance, theater, and American culture in college. I was in university in the 1960s, which was a time of great upheaval, both in the United States and in Europe. And when I finished my academic work, I really didn't want to do any more academics. I just wanted to dance. So I went to New York City, which was the place to go to dance then, and began to continue to study modern dance, improvisation, to do my own choreography. And almost immediately, within a year or two, I started to have pretty serious back injuries.
Mm.
And the way I was dancing, abusive to the body. And even though I really wanted to keep doing it, and I did for many years, I began to wake up to the fact that I needed to pay more attention to what was happening inside. So I started to study or participate in a number of different somatic modalities while I was dancing in New York, as part of my self-care, but also because I just wanted to keep dancing. Mm. So there was this transitional period where the reason that I was interested in the internal space was so that I could continue to function in the larger world as a performer, but was also fascinated by the developing new dance world and got involved in doing contact improvisation in the late 1970s. When some of the West Coast contact improvisers came to New York, started coming to New York, teaching, and I read about them in Dance Magazine, and ended up doing some workshops on the West Coast, and almost moving to the West Coast at that point. I then got pulled back to the East Coast and was teaching in France and around the country for a while longer. And then I got a job offer in Minneapolis. So I continued to do the somatic work, but it wasn't until I first studied with Bonnie in 1983 that I had this huge revelation about the inner life of my body. Mm. And I went to a summer workshop at Naropa Institute, and Bonnie was teaching a week, and Steve Paxton, the grandpa of contact improvisation, was teaching for a week, and I studied with each of them. With Steve, we did an amazing exercise at the end where we did a whole thing with our eyes closed, blindfolded, being led by a partner and then leading a partner through an outdoor area. And we ended up in a gigantic puppy pile, everyone blindfolded. And Steve said, this is the level of community that we need to be developing, was this sense of being in the world with the feeling and the hearing and the touching, but not so much the seeing outward.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bonnie taught a class on glands and development and organs. And that was really the beginning of my, so 1983, what is that? More than 40 years ago, the beginning of that really deep exploration with her. Yeah.
Beautiful. Could you please stay a little in this moment where you met Bonnie and this first exploration that you did with her? I read how a breakthrough moment for you was this exploration of the lungs and the heart. Do you remember this moment? Can you share it with us?
Absolutely. I've told this story so many times because it was a kind of an enlightenment moment for me. And so I had studied a lot of the Nikolai technique, which is based on kind of German modern dance principles that Nikolai developed out of his study with Hanya Holm, which came originally both from Wigman and the Bauhaus: space, time, shape, motion, energy. So the watchword of our school, in a way, was show me. If I can't see it, it's not, nothing's happening unless you show me what's happening. So there was a lot of outward focus, a lot of spatial focus. And I taught that curriculum a number of times. And in the introductory semester, we would spend one class exploring inner space, and all the rest of the semester was spent exploring from the skin outward. So there I was with Bonnie at Naropa Institute in Colorado for a summer workshop. And we were moving around the room, and she was inviting us to explore different organs. Nobody had ever given me permission or inspiration to pay attention to what my bones and muscles were dragging around all day. And I had a lot of back injuries, which I have later come to understand had a lot to do with the way the fascia and the organs are tense or pulling on the bones and the muscles. So she had us exploring the lush, light tissue of the lungs and how the lungs support the arms, the movement of the arms, and how the lungs come all the way up above the collarbone and fill the back of the ribs, the sides, and just that sense of lightness and support that comes from that very spongy tissue of the lungs. And then she said, now let's attend to our heart between the two lungs. And as you inhale, the lungs are hugging the heart. They expand in all directions. So of course they're expanding toward the heart and hugging the heart and supporting the heart. And your heart doesn't then have to do all the work. The heart is supported by your lungs. And the room was filled with about 70 people, 100 people who were in this big gymnasium, and people were dancing around and moving and feeling that. And as soon as I felt my heart, I burst into tears because my heart was so tired, really. and my heart was also felt so neglected. You know, my heart was really driving the passion of my dancerliness, and the struggle of being a dancer at that time, and really, not being able to earn a living, and really having to have a lot of will and oomph to keep going. So my heart was really exhausted, I think, and I burst into tears, and I ran out of the room, and there was a doorway at the back that opened into a big field. I was just sobbing and sobbing. It was such a huge relief to be asked, to be allowed, to be told that it's okay to feel your heart. You don't just have to move your arms and legs and, show everybody that performative self.
Beautiful. And this allowing ourselves to feel internal contents that we carry, it's really like an act of self-love, and a certain tenderness and gentleness arises from the tissue. And then it's this moment when we realize that these organs have always been there waiting for us to to pay attention.
Absolutely, yes. At one point in my training, later when I entered the practitioner training program, I was doing private sessions with one of the other teachers, Sarah Hostetler. We had to do a number of private sessions as part of our practitioner training, and we had to offer a number of sessions. But I was receiving these sessions, and we were doing really deep individual work with the organs. I remember one session in particular where she was supporting my liver. Liver is really the biggest, densest organ, and one never thinks about the liver unless you start to have problems.
Right.
We barely think about our organs or feel them unless they start to malfunction in some way. So we were working with the liver, and I'd also always been a vocalist, actress, and studied singing at some times. Not a professional in any way, but I love to do it, and I love to sing and use the voice. And sounds started to spontaneously issue forth from my liver. They were growling sounds. They were like, rah, deep sounds of releasing whatever had been held in there. And it started me on a whole track of making all of these drawings that were characters, and each organ became a character. They were almost like cartoons. And the act of drawing them, I used Prismacolor pencils, and I was really interested in pressing very hard on the paper to get a brilliant color. And that pressure felt like it was coming right out of the organs themselves. And each organ became a character. So the liver became Rover the dog. And then there was Sam's spleen, the detective. And there was Herbert's stomach, who was kind of compressed. I have these drawings. They were quite amazing, and they became a project for me that I did all through that part of the training. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And also very funny. Creativity just starts expressing from all these points. Would you say that the body is really like an endless fountain of creativity?
Well, I would say that we are the body. I am the body.
Yes.
So there's also energy that's outside the body, and there's exchange. So yes, the body is me, which is a manifestation of the creative force of the cosmos, a rather denser manifestation, not as dense as rock, but denser than air. And yes, that's, I think, who we are. It's not just what we do. Who we are is a creative process. That's how I experience it.
Now that you mentioned how sounding and releasing voice changes when we initiate the sound from a different place. Could you say something about the power of the voice and the sounding? I think it's an extremely powerful practice. And I myself, I've been doing music for a long time now, rapping.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow during my upbringing, I always grew up with this idea I can't sing,
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't hit the notes. And then when I started exploring who I am and just practicing releasing the sound, it's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so many folks are told they can't sing if they don't. There's a kind of coordination of the hearing and the vocal mechanism that requires some attunement. And so we can all sound unless there's something not working in the throat, but we can all sound, we can all move through pitches. For me, the vocal work and the body mind centering became one of my main areas of specialization because I always loved to sing. I grew up in a musical family. My dad was not professional, but he was quite a good musician. And then eventually he left his job, which was more of a wordsmith in advertising, and went back to school to get a degree in music and taught guitar. But he was also a pianist. And so we always sang around the house. And I felt very shy to use my voice, though, in public. So I was a dancer. And when I started dancing, dancers did not speak and did not sing on stage, but that changed during the time that I was performing and choreographing. We started to lots more with text and vocalization and singing. But for me, the last collection of poems that I published is called The Voices Movement. And so we dance with our spines, arms, legs, then we dance from our organs, we dance from our fluids, from our nerves, and the voice, the breath. Vocalization is a dance of breath, and the breath being channeled and interrupted and vibrated in different ways. So this area of the throat, the vocal mechanism itself, and all of the diaphragms in the body, that is all of the horizontal fibers of tissue that divide the body into compartments, which is just, about everything, the palms of the hands, soles of the feet, all of the ligaments in the joints that are kind of across the vertical axis of the body. They all become participants in this dance of channeling and shaping the breath into pure sound or into melody or into words. And I found when I started to explore this more from different angles and also to teach it, it was kind of in the shadow in our community. And by that, I mean, just for our listeners, in body mind centering work, the shadow simply means a part of ourselves, like a body system, a tissue, a process that's less well known or less expressed. So what seemed true for the entire somatic community that I was part of was that the voice was in the shadow. And it was what the vocal teacher, the well-known vocal teacher in England, Patsy Rodenberg, who worked with a lot of actors from the National Theatre in London, she calls this undervoicing. And there are many reasons why we undervoice, because the throat is an area that can become extremely tense and tight when we don't feel safe.
Right.
For whatever reason, when there's trauma in our lineages, in our background, or when we're part of a racial or cultural minority that's not accepted in the larger culture. Many reasons, or from illness, was something we've experienced that has caused us to shut down in some way. That's often manifest through a weakness or underdevelopment in the vocal mechanism itself, which is a very delicate diaphragm that's split in the middle that allows the air to pass through and then vibrates to produce the vocalized sound. And this was true for me. I have Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry on all sides in my family. I'm, second and third generation American. And I was taught that I could speak up in my family group, but I needed to modulate myself in public. And I continue to have to work carefully and tenderly with my throat and my voice and my vocal mechanism. So in order to stay healthy there. So this has become a very, very important exploration for me, a portal for somatic research. And the voice can express the throat, the mouth, also take in food, take in nourishment. The breath goes through the same passageway as the voice comes out of. So I think of the voice as a seventh limb, and there's a dance that happens as we extend our voices into the world or work with them and vibrate the structures very quietly and tenderly inside our own bodies. The voice can move inward, can move outward. So much of our connectivity with other people is through the vibration of the voice, the sound vibration, as well as the visual, the light connections. So that's a little bit. And I started to study singing with singing teachers because in our BMC community, and even Bonnie has struggled with her own voice. She took singing lessons as well. And she said, she said in her writings that she did the same lesson every week for 2 years. She had to do the same lesson over and over. When I worked with my one of my first voice teachers, every time I got to that vulnerable place where there's a change of register, and I have a little challenge there because the vocal diaphragm doesn't actually come together at that place in my throat, I would burst into tears. And my poor voice teacher didn't quite know what to do. She said, well, I don't know I'm not used to this. And I said, it's okay. It's okay, Mary. You don't have to do anything. I'll just cry when I need to, and then I'll go on singing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very powerful explorations. And also something about finding our voices, who we are, and speaking it. It's, it's really a statement, a step of courage, I would say, to speak our truth.
Yes, to speak the truth. Have you noticed that your voice has changed since or your relationship with your voice has changed since you started doing this work?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Since I've been recording music for a long time, since my early 20s, sometimes I listen to the old recordings and I see and I hear this disembodied voice, I would say. It's a voice, it comes out and it's recorded, but it's completely different than my voice after a couple of years. And since I've started my training and started exploring how to release voice from different parts of the body, and how this voice can have this incredible strength just by coming from my deep inside,
Mm-hmm.
and experimenting what happens when I really ground myself. And this
Mm-hmm.
voice comes from the ground, from the roots, from the feet, from the pelvis. It's an exploration,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel it's so vast that I'll probably be exploring that all my life.
In my tradition, in the Hebrew Bible, and particularly in the mystical tradition, there's a lot of attention paid to God's voice. How is how does the cosmos come to be? And in Judeo-Christian tradition, it's through God's voice. It's through voice that the universe unfolds. So that's a powerful image, mythic image to carry and to ponder in a way. Yeah.
Mm. And I read in one of your articles how in the Hebrew language, wilderness and speech come from the same root.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hebrew is a transitional language. It's an ancient language like Sanskrit, and it's a language that carries the transition from oral to written culture. Originally, Hebrew was written with no vowels. So if you were a reader, you had to participate in the creation of the language by adding in the vowels. And the vowels are what carry the feeling and the movement. The consonants are stops, basically, or rests, or containers. And the vowels are the flow and the movement. Yeah. And Hebrew is unlike English or languages that sort of come out of the Greek. It's not denotative. The words don't pin things down. They open up a doorway. So a verb root usually has 2 or 3 letters, and all of the different forms, the nouns and everything, in all the adjectives, adverbs, all the descriptive words are based on verb roots in Hebrew. So it's a language of movement. And the nouns, the things, and the descriptors are all crystallized movement in a way, which is really fascinating to me. And so these roots give rise to a whole family of different words. And so davar, midaber, midbar, it's all the same. The b and the va are the same letter in Hebrew, just different pronunciation. It's all the same root. So davar is thing, and midaber is to speak, and midbar is wilderness. And in the biblical traditions, so much of the language of and the experience of prophecy, which is really the translation of the invisible into the audible, or the inaudible into the audible, or the vibratory into language. And that happens in a space of wilderness, which is called, there's another term in Hebrew for the wilderness. Hefker is an important term in Jewish law and tradition. It literally means it doesn't belong to anybody. It's ownerless. So in this space that is not defined by, oh, this is mine and this is yours and this is one country and that's another country, it's an open area. And that's where the truth erupts into language in the biblical tradition.
Beautiful. Wow, so many interesting things. I don't know where to which direction to continue right now.
I know, I have that trouble myself. I don't know where to go sometimes. Which thing should I pick up? A book or a pencil, or maybe put on some music. But that is also, the beauty of the body mind centering way, right, is that it's not a technique. It's not a particular set of this is how you do it. it can be applied in different techniques. I really use a lot of that deep attentiveness to different structures when I'm doing my qigong or yoga or just walking down the street or gardening or whatever. But it's like an open field. That's how I experienced it. And so it's about expanding your range of choices and getting in touch with what your deep desires are and letting those desires lead you, rather than many of us being trained in a kind of, structured box-like way. And here's your path. And, you do this and then you learn that and then you learn this. This is a much more, what do you feel and where do you want to go with it? And yeah, there's infinite directions, numbers of directions.
Right, right, right. So, what was the moment in your life? I mean, it's probably a longer transition when you actually, went from the world of dance into the world of somatic therapy and studying body mind centering. What was your transition into your Jewish heritage and this
Yeah.
spiritual
Mm-hmm.
aspect and this desire that you saw actually the potential of all these somatic practices to become tools for spiritual work? Because
Whoa.
just one sentence, body mind centering provided for me many, many deep spiritual experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I perceived that the overt spirituality is never in the material. Nobody is talking about it directly or teaching it, but it comes out of the practice of being with the wonder that we
Mm-hmm.
are. So I
Mm-hmm.
consider this element of spirituality in BMC kind of like hidden, coded,
Yeah,
that it's not being talked about openly, but it's there for the taking if a person is ready.
definitely. That excellent insights and experiences that you've had match my experience as well. I had a religious education growing up, and it was a kind of Americanized religious education in Judaism. So it was intellectual in many ways. It was kind of from the neck up in a way, although there were other parts of that experience. That I went to a Jewish camp in the summers, and many of my colleagues found their spiritual connection at these Jewish summer camps, where there was a lot of music. There was dance and folk dance and prayer, and that's where a lot of my cohort became inspired. But I became rather uninspired at a certain point, because I think I always had this urge to move into leadership, and there weren't really any leadership possibilities for women when I was coming of age. And I also took a trip to Israel when I was in college for many weeks. I was there over a summer. And it was a very ambivalent experience for me, because I fell in love with the land, and I had a lot of trouble with the culture, which was quite militarized at that time already. This was late 1960s. They had just come out of a war, and I was a 1960s American person, and I could feel the tensions. I could feel the racism, what I would call racism. And we had plenty of racism in the US. So I thought, well, I should work on this in the place that I grew up, because I had thought maybe I would move to Israel and live there. And it didn't feel right. And I was kind of disillusioned. So I moved away from Judaism at that point and really devoted myself to dance. And to creative work, and that became a religion for me. So the spirit is always flowing through all of it, but the religion is something about the structure and the community of how you practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of left, not that I ever rebelled but I left behind that focus and threw myself into the world of dance and theater, mostly dance in New York City and choreography. And once I began to immerse myself more in the somatic world and go inward, and also be in the body mind centering community, which was the explorations were so open-ended and out there. And as you said, the spirit was there, but it was flowing, but we weren't really attending to it with consciousness, bringing our minds to that aspect. And I felt the need for something more structured spiritually, something for my spiritual life to be held. And what presented itself at that time was a mindfulness community, of Vipassana community in Minneapolis, where I was living. And I started going on Buddhist retreats, mindfulness retreats, where we would do mindfulness practice, loving kindness practices. I had a number of different teachers, some Asian, some American, all trained in different versions of Theravadan Buddhism, mindfulness practice. And I never felt like I was a Buddhist. And I never forced myself to study Buddhism, although I took notes on all the Dharma talks. And I was actually starting to teach in the Buddhist community. And I thought, this isn't right. This isn't quite right. This is not who I am. And it was at that point that I sort of rediscovered and was drawn back into the Jewish world. So I was already in my 40s, and I'd been doing body mind centering work for close to 20 years in one way or another. So I actually started doing some of that work before I met Bonnie in New York with one of the senior teachers who was teaching in New York, Gail Turner. And when I came back into Jewish community and started attending some services and holidays, I'd spent years lying on the floor, feeling my depths, feeling my pain, and my joy. And I felt the room was full of ghosts.
Mm.
The rooms were full of ghosts. The rooms were full of, the sanctuaries were full of unprocessed trauma, is what I felt. And I felt how people took that out on each other. I witnessed how communities regularly imploded. People would be fighting with each other or unable to agree on a structure, or there would be chaos. And I recognized these as trauma responses. And I realized that if I were going to come back into Jewish community, I would need to come back as a healer with this awareness and with the skill I'd gained in Buddhist practice of noticing body sensation, my own body sensation, and building up the tolerance for unpleasant sensation, being present with it, breathing through it, not to spiritually bypass, but to stay present with what was happening. And gradually, I just was drawn first into doing performance work about my own lineage, my own grandmother and my own family, and joining with other Jewish artists who were beginning to explore that for themselves, who had never expressed that in their artwork before. It was interesting. For me, I choreographed to many kinds of music, but never Jewish music for years. Bulgarian music or Cajun music or jazz. But I never expressed myself Jewishly in my performance work until this process got underway. And it was like a coming out. And first I did performance work, and then I found myself being invited to lead ritual. And I made a big move to California, not exactly knowing why, about 30 years ago, and suddenly found myself caught up in Jewish community and being recruited for rabbinical school, so it was this. And as I came back into the community, I knew that my role would be to bring the body, to bring all of the voice and the body, and to reawaken all of the parts of our tradition, which were from time immemorial extremely embodied. This was a land-based culture. They sacrificed animals, they cultivated crops. They were very embodied. When I read the old texts of the rabbis in conversation with each other, I hear very embodied people talking with each other across the millennia. And so that has become the core of my work as a Jewish teacher, is to integrate the embodiment and the tenderness, the self-love, all the things that we've talked about, to bring that, to know that what is hardest for me about my community and my religion and my spiritual communities is that people have been so cut off from their bodies and so defended.
Mm. Now that you mentioned that we can be cut off from our bodies, I noticed in many religions, people somehow go on this path that the body is sinful, that we should distance ourselves from the body and search for the God and spirituality outside the body, projecting somewhere outside the body.
Mm-hmm.
And a funny thing occurred yesterday. I recorded a little video about vibration. And I was just thinking about vibration and what it is to me. And I just used these words, how vibration has this range from the densest to the most rarefied.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of hours later, I was listening to one of your meditations, and you used exactly the same words, dense and rarefied. And I was like, okay, this is great. The interview has already started. So I would like you to talk a little bit about this concept from Jewish mysticism about the four worlds.
Yeah.
And this idea how spirit is not really separated from the body, but that they are just like different dimensions which are overlapping.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And thanks for listening to those meditations. You never know who's going to listen to those things when you put something on the internet, right? Yeah. So there are a few core concepts in Jewish mysticism that I've really delved into and resourced the embodied Judaism work in those ideas. And one of them is the four worlds. You could say, actually, that many of the concepts in at the root of contemporary psychology, starting with Freud, actually can be found in Jewish mysticism, and it's not clear how much inspiration Freud actually received, but we know he received some from Jewish mystics who were writing about dream interpretation and working with these concepts. So really, if you delve into the Jewish tradition, it's not an anti-body tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And some scholars believe that in biblical times, the human form was seen as God incarnate, really. Mm-hmm. That's why we're not supposed to make idols, because we are made B'Tselem Elohim, in the form and the likeness of the divine. So that's a little human-centric, but these four worlds can be seen as similar or analogous in some way to the four functions that Jung talks about also. So the world of Asiya, the world of physicality and doingness, would be the densest. And then the world of Yetzira, which literally means the world of formation. And we think of that more as the world of emotion and relationality and flow. The world of Buriya, which literally means creation, but that's associated with the creation that comes through imagination and kind of that more mind-oriented creativity. And then Atzilut literally means the proximity, or the most dissolved place, where we're closest to the, I guess you could say, the building blocks of creation in a way, the unconditioned. That's the world of the spirit. And they're all always present. And you could think, just as sometimes in the body mind centering work, we acknowledge that the whole body is always here, but we're putting our attention on this system. We're focusing on the bones, and we say initiate movement from the bones. Well, the bones can't move without the heart and the brain and the muscles and all the other systems. But by focusing awareness there, we allow that particular quality or mind of that tissue to come forward, to express itself, to reveal itself, to teach us, to be felt. And then when we go back to just moving our whole selves, the bones perhaps have more presence, or they work more smoothly or efficiently because we have taken time to actually feel each bone or feel a particular joint and be aware of it and offer it space to come forward. And I feel the same way with the worlds. They're all always there, but at some time I may be more focused in that world of the density of my physicality, and maybe I'm having trouble there. Maybe I'm having symptoms of some kind, or pain, or something that's hard to deal with. So how can I support myself? Maybe I can support myself by bringing forward the world of Buriya, of imagination. And I can imagine myself standing underneath a warm waterfall, or swimming, in a lovely pond, or standing on a favorite hillside, looking at a hillside of trees, something, and that will change my physicality. And the same thing with the world of emotions, the world of spirit. So if I really need to expand my container, I can open to that less dense world, that more rarefied world. But another key image in the tradition that I was thinking of as you were speaking was Jacob's dream. So Jacob has this famous dream in the Bible where he sees a ladder planted in the earth and the top of it in the heavens. And it says, messengers are coming up and down. Angels is another way of translating that in Hebrew. And I feel like that's what it's about. It's not about going up to the top of the ladder and then disappearing into that world. And it's not about being stuck at the bottom of the ladder. It's about cultivating the ability to go up and down the ladder, or from the inside to the outside and back again. That's what we're working on, is the movement through. But taking time to be with each of the worlds also gives us more fluency when we go back to the movement between. We can move more easily between.
Beautiful. And this brings me to this notion of the central channel, and how I perceive that we as humans, we are this connection between the planet, incarnated organism on this planet, which has a central channel which can go up and down, and our ability to connect different dimensions and realms of existence within this central channel. For me, it was very rich when we were exploring that through the perspective of the glands,
Mm-hmm.
how they really bring us up and down. One of the most amazing experiences of my life was exploring the glands in one spring. Everything was just like sparkling. After that, this beauty was shining forth so strong. So talk a little bit about the central channel, and if you can connect it with this rich symbolism of the tree of life from the Kabbalah.
Absolutely. So yeah, the sparklingness of the world and the glands, not surprisingly, was another of my main areas of interest and exploration and teaching in body mind centering. We talk about the glands as being really the tissue or system of the body that most it connects the physical and the non-physical realms, or the physical and the energetic realms. And the glands are a communication system in the body, and they are like a ladder that creates an up and down, or somewhat sideways, but mostly up and down channel in our embodied selves. I have a couple of drawings, paintings actually, drawings that I did that I used when I taught, and one was a kind of representation of the energetic quality of each gland with different colors, similar to the chakras. And the other I called the glandular ladder, and that showed the lines of connection between the different vectors of connection between the different glands. That looks kind of like an odd ladder because it doesn't just have rungs going straight up. They're all different directions, three-dimensional, or actually a multi-dimensional ladder, if you could imagine something like that. And voice is one of the ways that we really awaken and activate the different glandular centers. Bonnie has done so much work in recent years looking at how really the source of our whole embodiment comes from what she has identified as the perineal body, the glandular center at the center of the base of the pelvis. We didn't even have that named when I was first studying body mind centering, and one of the great gifts of the process of being part of this community has been that over the many years that I've studied and taught, that we have gradually identified, named more and more structures and embodied more and more structures as Bonnie has done that exploration and people in the community have done the exploration. So there are a number of these endocrine glands. So the endocrine glands are the glands located right along or on the central axis of the body that are a communication system that operate through the blood. So whereas our nerves operate through the nervous system channels, and it is through a change of electrical potentials along the surface of the axons, and that has a very different quality of communication energy within the body. The endocrine glands they're also called ductless glands. They secrete hormones directly into the bloodstream, and that can globally change our inner state rather rapidly. And the power, I think, of the body mind centering approach is to really relate to them as a whole system that is, each gland is physically in relationship and energetically in relationship with all the other glands. And, there are medical analyses of how the hormones affect each other and how that works. But this is a kind of energetic alignment that eases movement, that takes the stress and the responsibility off of the bones and muscles and gives us an energetic infrastructure, if you will,
Right.
that allows us to move with lightness, ease, delight, and wildness as well, because the energy of the glands can be quite wild. And I don't know if you've heard this story, but when Bonnie first started exploring the glands, she called people together for a workshop. You've heard this story perhaps. And
I read it in the
they,
book, I think.
yeah, they didn't know how to contain it or how long to spend. And they didn't know that they really needed to sort of integrate the whole system after every exploration. So people were just flying off the walls and having all kinds of wild experiences, and it was quite uncontained. It took some time to figure out how to present the material and explore it in a way that was more balanced. But balance is really the name of the game. And so there's an analogy between this system of glands. You know, there are glands in the head, so perhaps people might recognize pineal, pituitary, thyroid. You can kind of touch yourself all the way down your body and find different glands, pancreas, the adrenals. And then there are ones that we name in body mind centering that they're not identified in any traditional literature. So we call them bodies. Maybe we don't know what the hormone is, but it seems like there's a glandular center there. It feels like that. There may be a lot of blood supply, which is an indication. So the coccygeal body and the mammillary bodies in the brain. In Kabbalah, there is a visualization of, as you said, the tree of life, which is a kind of mediation between the most unimaginable, rarefied, unconditioned reality that our brains can't even conceive of. How do we get from there to this body? How do we communicate with that? How do we dance with it, play with it? So there are different iterations over the past couple thousand years in Jewish mysticism of what these emanations are. They're called sephirot, and that is also an interesting word. It's the same root as number or story. But in the original, the oldest book we have of Jewish mysticism, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, they're just described as sephira without a point, without substance. Blima, with no whatness. Sphirot blima, these points without whatness. And they're seen as the way that the divine emanates space and the elements. So there's breath, which becomes air, which becomes earth, which becomes water, which becomes fire, which becomes east, west, north, south, above and below. And those all come from these 10 points without substance. But later Kabbalah actually maps them in a vertical way onto the human body and ascribes qualities to each of these points. So you have the crown, which is still kind of outside the body. Then you have in the head area wisdom and understanding. Then you have loving kindness and strength, limitation. You have these triangles. There's sort of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis in a way, but they need to balance each other. So unbounded loving kindness is balanced by strength. Unbounded loving kindness usually associated with the right arm and shoulder. Strength, limitation, judgment associated with the left arm and shoulder. And if these qualities get detached from the tree and go wild, just like the glands, if strength, limitation, and judgment is out there on its own, doing its thing without connection with loving kindness, then you get wars, you get torture, you get armies, but there's an integration through the heart center, Tiferet, harmony, beauty. Same thing with the lower. There's the quality of perseverance and will balanced by surrender and humility. and they meet in the center in foundation, which is relationality, it's righteousness. And as it moves down, it gets denser, it gets more embodied, and finally is birthed into the world as Malchut Shekhinah, which is literally presence. And it's all still in the spiritual realm, really, but it's how that filters through and really informs our own physicality. And it's not the same as, but it gives us a similar kind of vertical qualitative journey as the glands do. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I don't know what to call it. Map.
Yeah.
Now, when you are speaking, I perceive it as really a web, a living organism, interconnected. Do these lines between the Sephirot have names?
Yes, each of the connecting lines is associated with one of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So in this early mysticism, this Sefer Yetzirah, it's both these 10 emanations and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Those are seen as the building blocks of creation. It's a sort of spiritual physics.
Beautiful. How it's at the same time vibration and sound and geometry, harmony. Yeah, and this whole pathway from the divine light to presence and integrated in the heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And similar to the way we work with the glands, we awaken each one often with sound or touch, and we express the qualities of them. We align them by touching different combinations and allowing the energetic lines of connection to open up. Very much the same with the Sefirot. If you want to use it as a spiritual curriculum, you can use these qualities as a kind of diagnostic for yourself. Am I over efforting? Am I using too much will? Can I balance that with more surrender, more humility? Am I extending my generosity too far without boundaries? How can I bring in that boundariness and that strength to help contain it? Otherwise it just all leaks away. So similar to the way we balance and align and express the glands or any physical structure in the body, you can work with this spiritual anatomy as well.
Thank you, Diane. I mean, this conversation could go on and on. Maybe we do a part 2 sometime.
Who knows? But I really appreciate your beautiful questions and presence and responses too. And it's amazing to me and very moving to me how this kind of work has brought together people from all over the world now. And we need, the image you used was a web, that we have that web in our own organism, and we have that web of connection now. And I am so grateful to you and glad that you're doing these conversations, because conversations like this help to strengthen that web, which is being so challenged by other kinds of communication right now that feed us unhelpful, challenging images. And so thank you so much.
Thank you for your words and for your voice. And shall we end with another song?
Oh, let's see. What shall it be? So the song, was a chant that was created by my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Shefa Gold. And it's the words there are Hebrew and English words to it. It's one of the prayers that is advised to be said on soon after waking up in the morning. So it's part of what we call our morning blessings. Elohai nishama shenatata bi tehorahi. So it's God, but the name for God is the name associated with power. So it's addressing the divine as my power. The soul breath that you have breathed into me, because in Hebrew the words for breath and soul are related. They're the same roots. And there are a number of words for breath that also mean soul. So my God, the soul that you have breathed into me is pure, and pure in the sense of being unsullied, untwisted by all the hard things that might happen in life, or even the great things that might happen, and coming back to that state of being 100% unconditioned and there. Those are the Hebrew words for this chant. And then the English words, "O pure soul, in you I see endless possibility." Mm-hmm. And that very much for me is the spirit of body mind centering as well. Right. So I'll sing that just for you. Elohai nishama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai nishama shenatata bi tehorahi. Oh, pure soul, in you I see endless possibility. Oh, pure soul, in you I see endless possibility.